Sunfury and Frostfire are extremely close in damage this patch. I just personally don't like having blue in my overall, so I won't be making a Frostfire guide. Also, please keep in mind, hotfixes and class tuning could happen anytime. It's an MMO after all, and it just so happens that Fire Mage was sort of overperforming in PTR, so fingers crossed they only nerf our damage, not our procs or interactions that we have that could gut our core. Okay, no downtime. There are ideal races for every class if you didn't know. Realistically, it doesn't matter, but if you are trying to min-max that 1%, go Troll. Berserker, being the on-use that they have, gives raw haste, and naturally for a Fire Mage that's extremely nice because it's our best stat by far. An unfortunate competitive option is Mechanome because of combat analysis. This gives you a notable amount of main stat ramping up throughout a fight, primarily being best in raid encounters because sometimes you can't use Berserker more than once. But if you don't want to play a mecha diaper baby, just go Dwarf. It's the best defensive race in the game because of Stone Form, and as a bonus it gives you 2% passive crit damage, so there's really nothing to think about rotationally or put onto a macro or anything. Tauren also has the crit damage passive and has the best flame strike animations by far. For stats, of course, main stat gives you raw damage, so while you're gearing up, go for that, but otherwise it's haste. Haste is coming up next, and then more haste. Sims don't really have enough information as of now on the next stat that we need, but in the past it's been mastery, and mastery scales harder with Sunfury, so that is to be expected. Verse would naturally be our third highest stat, but of course if you're doing keys, I'd recommend Verse to be a little higher than a third priority. Then crit because of critical mass. But if you're ever confused, the age-old statement remains. Sim it. On the topic of gear, Hyperthread Wristwraps are coming back from Operation Mechagon. They're going to be BIS for us because of how we can utilize them during our combust. I'll go over more of how we're using them during our rotation area, but as Sim stands in the Alter Time Discord, they're saying it's about a 0.8% DPS increase. But of course, more numbers will come out later on closer approximations. Here's the talent tree that we're going to be using for single target. Of course, it works in passive cleave situations as well, pretty much anything that we're not actually using Flame Strike for. This has us take Hyperthermia for the chance of every hot streak consumed to grant it for 5 seconds. Hyperthermia lets us spam our spenders and guaranteed that they all crit at no downside, so this is very good damage. As you can see here, we don't take it in heavy AoE though, like dungeons and such, simply because Living Bomb pumps for us now. Here's the single target rotation. First, we're going to go over the double Pyro opener, because this will be how we're entering Combust with no exception every time to maximize our damage. I'll be using short forms like Pyro for Pyroblast, PF for Phoenix Flames, and IB for Fireblast, because FB is for Fireball, and Fireblast used to be called Inferno Blast, and most written guides still use IB to specify Fireblast. In the opener, we precast Pyro, then cast a Phoenix Flames instantly after. If done correctly, they will fly towards the target together like so. Then we start casting Fireball. Since the Phoenix Flame, or PF, is guaranteed to crit, but the Pyro that we send is a coin toss, we're left with the following two paths. The more common of the two is that we're left with a heating up during the Fireball cast. In this case, we cast Combustion during the Fireball cast, and use an IB right after the Combustion, but again within the Fireball cast. Using IB after you activate Combustion is a very small increase, but something you should get used to because it primarily gives us about 2 seconds CDR on Combust, thanks to Unleash Inferno and Kindling in the talent tree. And of course, CDR can only be gained if the spell is actually on cooldown, hence the preemptive combust. So to recap, we Pyro, PF, cast FB. During the FB cast, seeing as we only have a heating up, we enter combust, then use an IB to convert that heating up into a hot streak, and we spend this hot streak on Pyroblast as soon as the FB cast is complete. This will have 2 more spells heading towards the target, being the FB and the Pyro, and since we're in combust, both of these are guaranteed to be a crit, giving us another hot streak. So we cast Pyro again, giving us our double Pyro entry. If, for example, the hard cast Pyro and PF that we cast in the opener both crit, it would give us a hot streak during the FB cast instead of just the heating up. This instance saves us from having to use an IB charge during the FB cast, so you just enter combust during the cast like normal and spam the Pyro for them to both fly and give you that second Pyro. As soon as your double Pyro has landed, you're wanting to IB, Pyro, IB, then use your wrist wraps as we talked about earlier. This will ensure that we're getting the most damage out of them as possible because the more IBs that we use to build hot streaks, the more globals we can commit to Pyro, leading us to fit more in during combust. During the remainder of our combust, our only focus is to get as many Pyros off as possible. IB will be at the top of the priority list to do so, and PF right behind it. If you're out of both of those charges, unfortunately you will have to Scorch to confirm another hot streak. But again, since IB is our main builder, anytime that we get charges refunded, we go back to them as a first resort. Once your combust is complete, you will enter your first Hyperthermia. This allows us to spam Pyro to our heart's content, but something to ramp up our damage slightly during this time is to use a single IB charge to refresh Feel the Burn, which gives us free mastery. If you're using an IB charge during Hyperthermia, you need to make sure that you're using it to convert a heating up into a hot streak. The hot streak buff will still double our Pyro's ignite damage, so you need to make sure to not refresh Feel the Burn with IB while you're already on a hot streak. Spend it first, then instantly IB. If you miss the window, don't do it, and even though PF also refreshes Feel the Burn, it's a damage loss because it costs us a global. Ideally, after your first combust into Hyperthermia rotation, you should be somewhat close to your next combustion because of the haste from Lust or PI, cycling through constant Pyros and CDR. Anytime you are entering a new combust, we don't hardcast the Pyro a second time, we just make sure that we're entering while already having a heating up. If you don't have one, just send a Phoenix, and then we're casting the FB again, or Scorch if the target is sub 30%, combusting during that cast, and converting a heating up with an IB, then sending our Pyro, then the next. And again, just going through our IB charges first, then PFs if we don't have any, then Scorching as a last resort because it's the quickest cast that we have and it connects instantly. Our filler is extremely cursed. Sure, we do damage outside of our CDs, but it's more like healer damage. We should be thinking about our filler like a stepping stone to get back into our CDs for the best results. The best way to do this is by generating as many Pyros as possible because of the CDR that it gives and the things that we have to do to get along there. If we're fresh off Combust, we can Shifting Powers, but keep in mind Shifting Powers gives us 18 seconds of CDR, so if Combust has anything more than 20 seconds or so, it's a safe bet, but you're also wanting to spend your PF and IB charges before you Shifting because otherwise you're wasting possible Pyros. The small combo I see a lot of the time is using a PF charge, casting Fireball, and during the cast using an IB to convert it to a hot streak, then sending the Pyro with the FB. It's clean, it goes through a few abilities that give good CDR in total, and the Fireball added in gives us an extra chance to land another crit, which is another heating up to convert. We can always hope for Hyperthermia procs to spam Pyros as well. If you have no charges of any kind, no shifting powers, and you're far from Combust, you're going to have to Fireball and just hope for some procs. Realistically, by the time you have a heating up, you should have an IB charge to spend for the hot streak, but if you don't, just keep casting Fireball. It's painful, but it's not often. Something I would really like to stress as well is when Combust is around 12 seconds until it's up, we're going to want to start pooling our resources. This means relaxing on the amount of heating ups that we're converting with IBs because we want to save those IB charges for our actual damage window. This might also be one of those times that we're having to Fireball on top of a heating up, again being painful, unless we're about to overcap on charges, in which case one charge to confirm a hot streak saves us from wasting the heating up. The AoE rotation is exactly the same concept as the single target rotation. Of course, instead of using our hot streaks into Pyro, we use them into Flame Strike when there are 5 or more targets. The reason we say 5 or more targets is because of Unleashed Inferno. It reads that our fire spells give significant CDR, but more specifically to the point, Pyro gives 1.25 seconds CDR on hit, and Flame Strike gives 0.25 on hit per target up to 1.25. So if Flame Strike hits at least 5 targets, we're not losing out on any CDR, hence the damage being equal overall because we need Combust up as much as possible. Sometimes in a 5-man pack, there will be a clear mob that's more powerful. I'd say in these situations, just cleave with Pyro and call it a day. But the rotation recap for AoE using Flame Strike would be to PF to get a hot streak, then Scorch into Combust IB, then double Flame Strike. The reason we're not casting much in AoE is because we never hardcast Pyro in AoE, it's too slow, and especially in dungeons it's simply not worth. Scorch is being used instead of FB here because the damage between them in AoE specifically is negligible, and Scorch lets us move to dodge things if needed, and overall just lets us have an easier time setting up for our cooldowns. We then continue the same bit using IBs first, then PFs, then Scorches as needed in Combust. During Hyperthermia, it's Flame Strikes instead of Pyro, assuming again there are 5 or more targets. Hopefully the filler is something that you'll never have to get to, but unfortunately it is the same thing. Use your instant casts for hot streaks assuming you don't have shifting, and if you're down tremendously bad, you can Fireball seeking for heat ups, but holy shit, don't hardcast Flame Strike. Just learn to manage your CDs over time, and through trial and error of combusting on the wrong packs versus the right packs, you will understand it over time. If you guys do have any other questions or are wanting clarification on something, I'll leave my Discord in the description. My DMs are always open. My weak auras, Plater, and LVUI profiles are also available. Another thing I highly recommend is just consuming content. Wowhead has a written guide, and some good videos I can recommend are ones from Forgy, Prehe, and Azuna. Another great way to learn is from watching people do keys or bosses and see what they do in certain situations, when they hold bust or shifting or when they use defensives and why. Regardless, thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something new.